welcome back to New Americans Immigration Today. I'm Erica Glenn, and today with me is immigration attorney Alexandra Okoli.
Hi.
And today we're going to discuss ICE, which is also known as Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement. And we're just going to go over a few things that will be helpful to you all to know. Again, myself, I'm an immigration attorney here in Houston, Texas. And Alexandra, can you please let us know where you work at and what you do here in Houston?
Hi, I'm Alexandra Okoli, and I am an immigration attorney as well. I have my own practice, Okoli and Associates, and I am also a senior supervising attorney for Catholic Charities.
Awesome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So again, we're going to go over a few important things to know. As you all know, during the current administration, anyone that's undocumented is a priority to be deported under the current Trump administration. And so that means that it's very important that you all know your rights in case you're ever encountered. I'm going to say it again. So as you all know, under the current administration, anyone who is not documented is a priority to be deported. And so that means that it's very important that you all know your rights in case you ever have an encounter with ICE, or maybe a friend or a family member also has an encounter with ICE. So today we're going to give you important tips on what you can do to protect yourself and your loved ones. The first thing would be if ICE comes to your door, you do not have to open the door to them. ICE always has to have a warrant, and so you can demand that they present a warrant to you. There's various encounters where sometimes people think that because it's ICE and because they're in a uniform, that they're obligated to open up the door. And when they do open up that door, they open themselves up to a ward of trouble, which is basically being deported, and they put themselves at the risk of being deported and losing any kind of status or protection they have here in the U.S. Do you want to add anything about that?
Yes, a lot of immigrants do believe that if there is an officer knocking at their door, that they have to answer that door. They might think it's a police officer, and the police are different from Department of Homeland Security officials or ICE, Border Patrol officials. You do not have to answer the door at all. You can act like you are not home. As Ms. Glenn had suggested, you can ask if they have a warrant. They are not welcomed into your house unless they have a warrant. And let them present that warrant through a window, if you have a window at near the front door, or through the peephole so that you can see that they have the warrant. Now, an issue that a lot of immigrants will face is the fact that they don't speak English and they can't read English. Well, don't answer the door. If they break down the door, that's illegal entry because they do not have permission to enter your house and they don't have a warrant to enter your house. So be mindful of that. And I know you're going to be scared. It's a very fearful time if someone is, an officer is banging on your door demanding that you respond to them. But just remember these bits of advice. You don't have to be afraid. You do not have to answer the door.
That's very good, very good. And one thing I would also like to add to that is you can actually ask the officer to slide the warrant under the door.
Yes.
And if they refuse to do that, again, like Alexandra said, do not open the door and just act like you're not home. Another thing is always remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you, and ICE will use it against you. So it's best to let them know you're going to exercise your Fifth Amendment right and you're going to remain silent. You have that right. If you're here in the U.S., you have the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and you do not have to say anything if you don't want to. Do you want to add anything on?
You pretty much got it. It's very important that you remain silent. Don't say anything. And yes, ICE uses everything against you. From the time you cross the border, they have a record of everything you say. And if you later are in a hearing or a final hearing in regards to your immigration matters, all of that will come out to use against you. So you, as stated, you do have a right to remain silent and you don't have to say anything. And just to piggyback off that, I know you're going to cover not to sign anything, and that's even more important if you wanted to start with that, go on to that.
Exactly. That's a great way to piggyback off into our next point. But yeah, the next important thing is do not sign anything, and it kind of goes along with not saying anything as well. You don't want to sign any document, especially if English is not your first language, because you don't know what you're signing and you don't know how that document will and can be used against you if you do end up having a case before an immigration judge. So the best thing to do would be to tell the ICE officer that you want to wait until you speak with your attorney. That's your right. And once you speak with your attorney can advise you on whether or not you need to sign that document, or if it's something that is really not that important and it does not need to be signed.
It's important, and you may not think of it while you're going through the actual encounter with ICE officers, but document everything. I know we previously discussed videotaping, have someone videotape what's going on, so that when you do meet with an attorney later on, or if you're in a tribunal or some other type of official, you can play this video and show what actually happened. For the non-English speakers, it's even more important, as previously stated, that you do not sign anything. If you cannot read it and you do not know what it is, you may feel forced. I know I've had clients that tell me that they were forced to sign something. I'm like, did they take your hand and make you write it? Don't feel forced, because they cannot force you to sign it. They can make threats. They will probably make threats, but you don't have to listen to them. And like as previously stated, say that you want to contact your attorney. That always scares them away a little bit, even if you don't have one, because you have a right to contact your attorney.
It's so true. And I just want to talk about, I think that's a really good point how you made it in terms of people feeling forced, and just with the threats. And they're going to make threats to you. That's their job, is to threaten you to the point where you say, you know what, forget it. I'll just leave. I'll leave the U.S. on my own. Don't even worry about it. I won't even fight for my case. I won't fight for my rights. That's what they want you to do. And so it's very important that, like Ms. Okoli said, don't sign anything. Ask to speak to your attorney, and don't be intimidated by the threats. That's what your lawyer is there for. And even if you don't have a lawyer in that moment, it's okay. When you are detained, most detention centers are supposed to do this, but they're going to give you a list anyhow of local nonprofits that will take your case. And so one of the attorneys from those lists of local nonprofit agencies in your area, they can help you once you are detained. So don't be intimidated. Don't feel forced to sign or say anything. It's really to your benefit to protect yourself not to sign or say anything when you're confronted by ICE at your home. Or anywhere, pretty much anywhere, even if you're confronted somewhere on the streets, which we'll go into that a little bit later about how to protect yourself if you do encounter ICE in a random place, if you're walking down the street, or maybe if you're in a store somewhere. We'll go over that and what you can do. The next thing I would probably say is definitely to report any encounter. You always want to make sure you have everything documented. So let's say, for example, this is a good point now to talk about if you encounter ICE while you're walking down the street somewhere. So let's say that you are walking down the street and ICE comes and they try to detain you. Well, you're not at a home. You don't have the option of closing the door. You don't have the option of acting like you're not there. They're in your face. And so what are you going to do? Most times they're going to end up taking you away, because at that point they have you in custody and there's really nothing that you can do. So the next best thing you can do is remember not to say anything, not to sign anything. And if you have someone who's with you, get that person to take their phone out and record whatever is going on, especially if you're being treated in a way where you're being abused or assaulted by ICE. You want to have that document. It's so important. It's important because we can get that information out to news outlets who can help you with your case. And it's also important because you're going to have a record that you can show even a judge to let them know, hey, this is what happened to me. My rights were violated. I said that I didn't want to speak to the officer. I said I didn't want to sign anything, and he or she made me do this. And so you want to have that record to document your case and what's happened to you. And so that's always good to have a camera. If you don't have a camera, have a person, if you know anyone, just yell out and ask someone, hey, please record what's going on right now. Please record what's taking place. And so that you and that person can both report back to an immigration judge or to the government in terms of what's happened to you and how your rights have been violated.
And Erica, you said something very important that I want to piggyback off of, the fact that you said my rights have been violated. And a lot of immigrants do not think that they have rights here in the United States because they're not U.S. citizens or permanent residents. everyone has rights here. And if you have a right to be treated with respect, and you have a right to an attorney, you have lots of rights, you know, and you need to remember that just because you're not a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, it does not mean that you do not have rights. The fact that you're on this soil, you have rights, and you deserve to not be mistreated or mishandled. So when you keep that in mind, then you can remember that if you are being mistreated or mishandled, you would let an attorney know, you would let a judge know, and so forth, because you have a right to get that worked out properly.
Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. I can definitely share from a personal experience about a case I encountered with the client. Well, I should say one that they encountered with ICE, and that would be sometimes ICE is going to come to your home and they will catch you off guard. So in this situation, I had a client who had entered the U.S. Many years ago, probably 15 to 20 years ago, and had been in and out of jail. Mm-hmm. And so he was pretty fortunate to get out of jail without any issues in terms of not being referred to an immigration judge. And so he thought everything was okay. He thought he was living under the radar. One morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning, he went to take the trash out, and ICE was there waiting for him, and they came and picked him up. That is a very realistic scenario, especially right now under the current administration, because people who are undocumented are priorities. Yeah. And so they might come and get you from your home. So in that case, his wife did the best thing she could have ever done. Mm-hmm. She documented everything with her phone, brought the phone to my office so that I was able to see exactly what happened. She did ask the ICE officer why her husband was being arrested. Of course, they didn't tell her, what was going on. But we had enough information to start working on his case and start advocating for him. In that instance, unfortunately, he was guilty of a few different crimes, so he wasn't eligible to stay here. But at least we were able to fight for him as best as we could while we were here with the information that his wife had given us, which was basically taking that video of what happened. And he did the right thing, too. He refused to sign anything. He didn't say anything to them. But I wanted to share that scenario with our audience just so they wouldn't know. That is something that can happen, but in that instance, again, don't say anything. Ask for your attorney. Tell them that you have a lawyer, and that as soon as you do get to detention, you will be calling your lawyer to speak with them. Of
course. Now, two things. I know with the immigration climate, there's so much tension right now, especially with the current administration that we're currently under. And yes, ICE is using any means to obtain information on undocumented immigrants here in the United States, And a lot of children that come in and they're placed in detention centers. Previously, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is an office of the Department of Homeland Security, that takes care of children that come across the border without any guardian, to reunite with a parent that is possibly, or a guardian that's possibly here in the United States. Previously, they had no problem releasing the child to another undocumented family member. And under certain circumstances, they still continue to do that, as long as they pass their background check and they don't have a criminal background. However, the Department of Homeland Security and ICE have been using these records to locate other undocumented immigrants who are staying here, such as the sponsors or guardians of these children that came across the border undocumented as well. So it's making it difficult for parents or guardians to come out and stand up for the children who are being detained in facilities. And we understand it's tough. Again, I know that lawyers can cost money, but there's a plethora of organizations that do offer pro bono work, and a lot of other firms that reach out to do pro bono work, even though they're private firms or agencies. They do have a department where they fulfill the obligation of giving, well, it's not necessarily an obligation, but just to give back to the community and participate in pro bono programs, pro bono work. Generally at detention facilities, as previously stated, there's a list of pro bono attorneys and pro bono agencies that can offer help. So I do believe it's very important that you contact an attorney to help you, to advise you, and to answer any questions that you may have in regards to your case or a family member's case.
That's very good. And one other thing I would like to add in also is if you do end up getting detained by ICE, just know that it's not the end of the world. You can still fight your case. You might be eligible for bail or bond, is what we like to call this, immigration bond. So you might be eligible for an immigration bond. So don't lose hope if that does happen to you or a loved one, which is the importance of seeking out legal counsel. And legal counsel, we can help you get an immigration bond. I would say one good thing to prepare, if you have a feeling or maybe you're just fearful that it could happen to a loved one or a friend, steps that I would take if I was in that position to prepare is I would definitely save up some money. Generally, immigration bonds, they run between $1,500 all the way up to sometimes $25,000, $30,000. And it really just depends on the particulars of your case, and sometimes the location. Different states have judges that do different things, that have different requirements, different feelings about different immigration cases when it comes to setting bail.
Definitely.
Some of them, they don't really care what kind of case you have. Your bail will always be between $10,000 to $15,000. Which is really not fair, but at least you know that. And I think that's one of the most common things I see when people get detained is that the family is scrambling for money. Because remember, with an immigration bond, it's different from a criminal bond. A criminal bond, if you're detained, you pay 10% of that amount. So, for example, if your bond is $10,000, you pay 10%, which is $1,000, and you can get released. With immigration bonds, you pay the full amount in order to be released. There are some immigration bond companies, but they have very high interest rates. And you'll end up paying almost double of what your original bond was. So I would definitely say save up money just in case a family, a friend, or a loved one is detained. I will definitely say have all of your documents together. Different and very important documents that you want to have handy, for example, are a copy of your birth certificate. It definitely needs to be translated if it's not in English. You want to have a copy of a sponsor of their biographical documents. So, for example, say you have a friend or a family member that's a lawful permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, and that person wants to be the sponsor who tells the judge, hey, I'm going to look after this person and make sure to go to every court hearing if they are released. You want to make sure you have a copy of their driver's license, their birth certificate, their passport, anything that can show the judge that you have someone who can look after you and make sure that you will comply with all immigration requirements if you are released from bail. So I would definitely say, but definitely the money is very important.
It is. And I'm going to piggyback off of that as well. I always advise my clients, I advise against going to bond companies because you do end up paying almost twice that of what the original bond is. But, you know, people are in dire circumstances when it comes to finances. If you don't have any type of cash flow, then but you have collateral sources, then you can use that as well. But I know I hate incurring debt or credit, so but I understand the circumstances, and you need your family member to be released so that they can continue to pursue whatever form of relief that's going to be pursued for them. But upon the end of their immigration proceedings, the money will be refunded to you, and that is if you pay cash up front for the bond. If it's through the bail company, then the money goes back to the bail company, and you still lose money because of the interest that you paid on making that bond. But again, not to discourage you from pursuing bond companies, because again, people just don't have that amount of cash available to set bond, but just letting you know that it's in your best interest to have that cash flow available. And it's a lot of money, but it's your family member, so, or a loved one.
Exactly. And the most important thing is we just wanted to let you all know is that there is hope. If you or a family or a friend ends up getting detained by ICE, there is hope. You can definitely fight your case and hopefully end up getting released from detention. And so I think that's it for me. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I believe we've pretty much covered everything. Just again, to have hope. It's not the end. And I want to say that there are more on your side than against you right now. We have people that are protesting immigration rights. We have so more attorneys than ever before that want to be a part of this fight for immigrants' rights, and they are offering their free services. So, you know, keep that in mind. Watching the news can be kind of depressing sometimes, but then you watch segments like this which provide encouraging points of views of what is really going on and the reality of the situation, and giving you the positive side of what's going on. So there are people out there who want to help you. You just got to know the right people and the right organizations and to be hopeful.
I agree. Well, again, thank you for tuning in and joining us today on KBTV channel 15.8.